Welcome to a Mastering the Marketplace video. This video is designed to help you get your offer onto the Microsoft Marketplace as quickly and easily as possible. You can find videos, hands-on labs, and example code at this URL, aka.ms/mastering the marketplace. We're going to see a end-to-end demo of working with a managed application deployment package, which is the zip file that we upload to the technical configuration of one of our plans in an Azure Managed App. So let's get started with the main template.json, which is a ARM template. You may be familiar with these already, but these are files that give us a way to deploy resources into Azure. They're not specific to Azure Managed Apps or the Marketplace or anything like that. We use ARM templates all the time to manage our deployments. And as Julio mentioned, they are configured as code, which means that we're able to version control these things. Now let's look at the main components of an ARM template. We'll start with parameters. And notice that this particular ARM template takes 3 parameters, each of which is a string. This is a very simple ARM template, about the simplest you can get so far. So the storage account name prefix, storage account type, and location. Location happens to be required in an AMA ARM template. In addition to the parameters that get passed in, we have variables that we can define. In this case, a storage account name, which is going to have the suffix of a unique string that gets generated dynamically. There are functions that we can use within an ARM template, and this is one, as is concat. Right? So we can build up the account name that we want for our storage account in this way. And finally, we have resources. The only thing that will be deployed by this ARM template is a storage account. Again, I said this is about the simplest ARM template one can find. So we know that's a storage account because the type of resource being deployed is here. And that variable that we created is being used here to name the storage account. So you can see in general how these ARM templates work. Pretty simple and straightforward most of the time. And we'll go ahead and create that next piece of the deployment package that Julio was telling us about, which is createUiDefinition.json. And then createUiDefinition.json, I'm just going to drop in some of that code so that you don't have to watch me type it. Believe me, you don't want that in your life today. And turn that off for the moment. So what are the main pieces of a createUiDefinition file? Remember, this file defines the experience of actually deploying our Azure Managed Application. Notice we have at the very top in the parameter section, we have basics. And actually, I'm going to do a format document there. We go. So that you can see it lines up under parameters. So we have a basics section. This is the first screen that we will see, and we don't have any anything in basics, so it's going to just show us our default view. Steps is going to allow us to create additional tabs with controls and things like that on them, as we'll see. And then outputs, remember, we talked about the idea that the output of a createUiDefinition file feeds the parameters of main template.json, and we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this file, the contents of this file, and drop it into what we call the Create UI Definition Sandbox, which is a blade within the Azure portal. You can use this, and there are links to it in the labs that you'll go through on the package management. I'm just going to drop in my very basic Create UI Definition contents, and I'll come down to the left and hit, actually, let me zoom in just a little bit here if I can, if it'll let me. There we go. That might be a little bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and select preview. Remember, I said that the basics section, which you can see this is a tab, is going to show us only the most minimal things necessary to create our managed application. In this case, the preview that we're getting from Sandbox shows us which subscription is going to be used to make the purchase, which resource group we would like to put our managed app in. This is the actual instance of the managed application, not the managed resource group. That will actually be shown to us down here when we actually build this and deploy it. For some reason, the Sandbox doesn't actually render the managed resource group select box, and I don't know why that is, to tell you the truth. So we can select which region we want to go into. We select review and create. Notice it's telling me, yeah, you're not ready to go because you didn't select the resource group that was required. But were I ready to go, I could hit in a live situation, not in a Sandbox, but in a live situation, I could click create, and that would take me over to actually creating my offer. All right, I'm going to jump back to the Sandbox and clear it out. And we'll then head over to our Create UI Definition file. Now, I'm going to drop into the steps section some JSON. It looks like a lot, so let's clean it up a little bit. Some JSON that enables us to collect information about our storage account on a different tab. So the name of this step is storage config. It has a label and a blade title, which we'll see up at the top. That's going to be the name of the actual tab. And down here, this gets more interesting. The elements array is where we're going to define the controls that will show up on this page in which we can collect that information. So we have a couple of controls here. And the first one we'll look at has the name storage accounts, but it's of type multi-storage account combo. This is a very special control that knows how to help us create a storage account. And we'll see that in the Sandbox. We have a tooltip there and a few more properties. I never know what to call JSON keys. So properties that will guide the behavior of this control. One of the things is, for example, in this particular case of the multi-storage account combo, we are limiting the allowed answers here with this allowed types array. So you can get premium locally redundant storage standard or globally redundant storage. So I'm going to copy the contents of my Create UI definition, drop it over here in the Sandbox as we did before, and hit preview. Now we can go to our storage settings blade, and we may need to put in some content to name our storage account. There we go. And this control that we're using is sophisticated enough that I can actually come over here and select which type of storage I would like. And in my case, as I'm just showing a demo here, we want to keep it cheap. I will go ahead and leave it at locally redundant storage, and then I could progress through my installation screens here. So let's head back over to, if I can find it, our editor. There we go. And I'll clean up that storage account, and we're going to add another step here. This one's going to be a little different. And I'm going to close up elements. We'll get to that. So, oh, I put that thing in the wrong place, didn't I? It doesn't go in the elements array because we're adding a new step. My apologies there. So that goes right there. There we go. So we have a couple different things in our elements array for this particular step. What is this? This step is named account, and I might be wanting to collect some account information from my customer during the setup process. Who knows what this account could be for? It could be for provisioning an account in an application that runs on a virtual machine within your managed resource group. Who knows? But we're collecting account information in this case, and notice that we actually have validation capabilities. So enter your account name, post validation, it's done. Here are the elements that we have in here, and one is so simple. It's just a text box, and this is where we collect the name. So we've got it named as name instance, and down here we have a regular expression to actually validate the input to this text box. So this regex ensures us that the value must be 4 characters long, only 4 characters. And, you know, I limited it to 4 characters just to demonstrate that we can limit to an alphanumeric number the input to a given text box. We'll close that element up, jump down to the next one. I'm going to, just to make sure our file is in good shape, I went ahead and formatted it. This is a password box control. You can see that here. And it's going to render a little differently for us. So it reads that the password must be at least 8 characters long, contain only numbers and letters, which means it's alphanumeric, of course. And so that is our password box that we're going to see rendered in just a moment. But the password, because it's a different type of control, is going to render a little differently than a plain text box. Let's jump over to our sandbox. We'll go back to the beginning. We'll clear out the JSON, drop in our new JSON, hit preview. Oh, I was afraid of this. And there we go. We've got some daemons in our demo. Let's clean this up if we can. Oh, there we go. Looks like that's going to be our error, hopefully. And here we go. Let's hit preview. All right, we cleaned up that JSON. So in our account information tab, which we just added, we can add a very simple storage account name. So apparently our account name is for storage. And I forget, it could be 4 characters long if I recall. So we click off of that, we get our validation message that's triggered by the regex, and there we go, we actually are able to validate. Now in our password control, remember this is a special control, and so when we type in our password, it's going to mask it for us and actually apply the rule that they must match, okay, which they don't in this case. There we go. And I believe they do now. There we go. So this is an example of a more sophisticated control, just like the storage picker, that allows us to have some capabilities we don't have to write ourselves within the createUiDefinition file. Now I'm going to jump back to our code, which is now valid, thank goodness. And I'll collapse up our steps here. So we've got 2 steps in so far. And as you may imagine, I'm going to add one more. And this step is going to be a little different than the ones we've seen before. Let's start up at the top of this step. I'm going to go ahead and again format this document. There we go. So the name of this step is API Blade step, and it has a type of ARM API control. Well, what is that? Well, it's an it's a control that allows us to talk to an Azure API, and we do that through a given path to an endpoint. In this case, we're calling our subscription. It's going to be our subscription ID WAC resource groups, and so we're able to call an endpoint that provides back to us our resource groups. All right, and next we have a drop down that is going to actually map the results of that API Blade step, this one, API resource groups, because it doesn't render. And so it just makes the call. The drop down is what's going to render the values. And so you can see that we've got a little, it's almost like a Lambda, right? That's mapping the label and name of the drop-down list from the results of that API call. We have essentially the same thing going on in the next API ARM API control, and in this case we're actually looking at all the storage accounts that might be present in my subscription. So that gives me an opportunity to select an existing storage account such that maybe we want to deploy something into that resource group or deploy something into that storage account, what have you. So we render that again with a drop down, and let's see what this looks like. I'll take my JSON, I'll drop it over into our Sandbox by clearing out what we have, dropping it in, and hitting preview. So we now have a blade called API calls. You can see that it is going to look at the resource groups present in my subscription. I'm going to select EC motorcycles in my GitHub repos. Those are a couple of fun projects I've been working on. And you can see I've got 2 selected. Now we're going to look at these storage accounts present in my subscription. So I have many of them. I'll select the EC motorcycles one. You can tell that's part of the same project. And this would allow me to actually capture these values, pass them to the ARM template. Speaking of that, let's head back over to our createUiDefinition file and notice that we have in main template, actually let's open up our parameters. We had 3 parameters that we had to provide values for, right? They are storage account name prefix, storage account type and location. And over here in our createUiDefinition, you can see that our outputs are provided by referencing the controls that are in our elements array for a given step. So for the step storage config, we're going to access the storage account property and the prefix property of that. Same thing for type. And then we provide location as a function. The next thing we are able to do with this is actually check our work using a tool called ARM-TTK. Now, what we have here is a PowerShell script that will walk through our code that belongs in our deployment package. That is the createUiDefinition and our main template.json. It's going to look at those and it's going to run some tests. Think of these almost as unit tests. You can even plug these into your continuous integration environment should you choose to do so. So we're going to go ahead and run these tests. AMA package is just the location of my files that I want to run against. So I'm going to run that. Woo, look at all that red. A lot of red. So these are tests that failed against the create UI definition file. So to be explicit, we have a test for create UI definition, and down here at the bottom, you can see that it's validating the main template.json, two different sets of tests. The create UI definition has a lot more trouble, obviously, than the main template. So let's just fix main template. And what we can see here is that it's failing the API versions should be recent test. So let's go ahead and check out its recommendation. Must be latest or under 2 years old. So I have an old API reference in my ARM template, and it's saying that this particular one, 2019-0601, there's an instance of that in my ARM template, and that's not okay because it's really old. The last thing I'll mention is that, of course, to deploy it, we simply zip those two files up into a zip file, drag and drop it onto our technical configuration page in Partner Center. Thank you for joining us for another video from Mastering the Marketplace, the learning library where technologists go to get their offer on the Microsoft Marketplace. For more videos, hands-on labs, and sample code, find us at aka.ms/masteringthemarketplace.